So I wanted to ask you first about how you were an early adopter with Masters of the Sun about 4 or 5 years ago. You did something which we hadn't seen before, which is really engage with the audience in a way that's different using technology. So I wanted to ask you, one, why you did that, and what you've learned from that experience, and how technology, the metaverse, is changing entertainment as we know it.
So yeah, in 2007, actually, we came across the ability, actually no, before that. So in 2010, Black Eyed Peas launched a song called The Time, which is also called Dirty Bit. And in this video, and we showed that you could use the phone, aiming at a QR code, and out comes a digital character. And that album, if you look at the album cover of the beginning in 2010, the whole album was based on avatars and 8-bit characters, which kind of look like NFTs today.
Right.
But in 2010, they were not called NFTs. And we used 8-bit characters because it was the digital world that was impacting the world as we knew it. And in the video of Dirty Bit, people became digitized, and QR codes and using the lens of storytelling and the digitization of everything is what Dirty Bit is about.
Right.
And the chorus went on, I had the time of my life and I never felt this way before, and I swear it's true and I owe it all to you, and that you are developers. Right. That you are the technicians, the engineers. Because when we get up on stage and we hold that Grammy, you're really holding a gramophone. And our music industry and our television industry is all based on engineers.
Right.
It's just that we never thank the engineers when we hold that Grammy. We never thank Edison's, we never thank, General Electrics or RCA or Victrola. We don't thank the tech. Mm-hmm. NTSA, PAL, that's all tech to broadcast and transfer. And so that album that came before the beginning was the end. I Got a Feeling and all these records, because it depicted a time where it was no longer about physical cells.
Right.
It was about the digitization of everything. And it truly was the end. But with the end is also the energy never dies. And so we like to play on titles and words, and we were doing NFTs and AR. At the time with devices, there were very few of them had those capabilities back in 2010. So in 2018, when things started to crystallize and Oculus Quest gave you parallax where you could look under and up and down things, we told a story in what is now called the Metaverse, which I don't really like that name.
Do you have an alternative?
Huh?
Do you have an alternative? We can all start adopting.
You could do like Ultraverse or Omniverse. I just don't think one company should own the name Meta, because now people think that it's like their company stuff. They own everything else. Why are they going to own everything else?
Well, I think Brent was trying to get away from owning the metaverse.
No, you know what I mean? Like, Roblox is awesome.
Yeah.
Disney's great. And they work great with children and children's privacy. So we really have to be careful in what we call this thing as it's growing, and business practices that undermine people's civil liberties and privacy, especially children.
Yeah. I mean, the point about children, young people, and their exposure in different ways, especially in a time when perhaps their parents, their educators might be not as in tune to the changes that are happening that are quite rapid. So what advice would you give? I mean, what for policymakers who are here with us in the room, what advice would you give to policymakers, to educators, to try to get ahead of this and, one, understand it, but two, also make sure that children and young people are protected? That's
a heavy question. I'm not I'm not a politician. I'm just a guy with a big, huge imagination that at my core job, what I did making music was to spread joy
Yeah.
and bring people together. And so that comes with a different lens, right? Where you're thinking about people's well-being and people having a good time and being safe at the same time. And music is about harmonizing. It's about, bringing order to noise. And if policymakers could practice the same practices we practice in music, and that is bringing order to noise, being harmonious, and getting along. As soon as I come into a room and I'm at a different key or tune, I'm no longer making music. I'm no longer gelling, and business practices are not musical. They're not harmonious. And so we need to govern for people, especially with these new technologies that understand us better than any religion, better than any parent, better than any. These companies understand and can predict what a child will be and follow a child forever. And we've never been here before.
Right.
This is brand new. So without thinking about how people can be in the crossfire, mental health, judging every single conversation, swipe, eye, dilation of pupil, eyebrow, facial expression, muscles, moving. We've never been here. So you gotta think about the person. You have to think about the communities of folks. You can't aggregate all this information and sell it to foreign threats for profit. That's like, what? We're gonna look back at these times and deem these companies and their business practices inhumane. Right? Remember, when you watch these Wild Wild West movies and you go to some Western town and everybody whips out guns and they shoot people on the street?
Yeah.
Be like, wow, that was Wild Wild West. Turns out the WWW is not only World Wide Web. That's the Wild Wild West because there were no laws.
And the governance part of it is going to be hugely important. You definitely have support from the audience. The governance part is really important, but so is also the accessibility part. So for young artists who are looking at these changes and thinking, I need to get in there, like you said, NFTs, they weren't called NFTs before, and now they are, and people are competing because they're scared they're going to get left behind, so to speak. So for a young artist or a young person who's going into the creative space, what skills do you recommend they pick up? What knowledge should they have, and how can they equip themselves for this new era?
So say, for example, you're a musician. You play a piano. You don't play the drums. So you need a drummer. And now you have a pianist and a drummer. And then someone says, hey, you probably need a bass player. So you go look for a bass player. Now you got a cool little band. You got a 3-piece. Then someone says, hey, you need to get a guitarist. Then you find that guitarist, like, hey, cool, great. We got a quartet. And I got a lead singer. Then someone says, hey, yeah, but your clothes are kind of whack. You should probably get that stylist. Somebody comes and dresses you nice, you look the part. Now, somebody says you need to bring a developer in. You need to bring a data scientist in. You need to bring somebody that understands spatial computing. You need to bring somebody that understands machine learning. Now you have a network. Now you have a band that can connect folks in ways that traditional networks don't. So you want to entertain and inspire musicians to not only look at musicians to be in the fold.
Right.
Because a musician and a song is totally different when you have someone building on an Unreal Engine or in Unity.
And can I ask, that's a really good point about saying you need to bring developers in, you need to rely on other resources, but there's also a concern that you almost lose control in a way, not knowing how it will develop beyond your capabilities. I mean, how do you, as an artist, but also give advice to artists who are up and coming to make sure that they don't lose control?
Well, the cat's out of the bag. We've all lost control. You got 20 million followers on platforms. You don't control the conversations with those 20 million people. You don't have access to every single one of those 20 million people. You got 20 million people that follow you. Those 20 million people are not seeing all your content. You got to pay for that. And if you have to pay for folks that want to see you, you don't have control.
Right.
So we've lost control at the core of what we all strive for, and that is to communicate and have connection with folks. So you want to gain control back by having developers in your fold. You want to gain control back by understanding the construct of how these platforms that we live on every day are built. You want to gain control by understanding your value and data is currency. You want to gain control by understanding that 8-year-olds to 18-year-olds are not invested in to compete with the world that's coming. You want to go out, if you have the ability, to go and adopt a high school and prepare these young kids for this autonomous tomorrow, for this very highly technological robotic tomorrow. Because if you look at the investment for tech versus the investment to make people intelligent, it's lopsided. So when it comes to control, who's in control? If I can't compete with a machine, if I'm 13 years old and I'm forced to take things in class that aren't really going to benefit me in 2040, 2050. So it's important to really understand where we are in the conversation of control and what we do as individuals and collective to prepare this youth for this tomorrow.
You know, I was at a talk here yesterday where a great futurist was saying that, you know, humans at the moment keep thinking they have to become more and more efficient, but machines are always going to be more efficient than us. So rather than trying to compete with the machine on efficiency, what we need to think about is creativity, logic, empathy, emotional intelligence. And you're supporting a California state initiative to help bring arts and music back into schools, and that's part of the thinking, that how do you equip somebody young now to compete in that future economy. Here in the UAE, a lot is being done about the creative economy and making sure that you grow a creative economy. So my closing question to you is that bringing in the strands of education, and similar to the work that you're doing at California State, but also bringing in the creative economy and strengthening it at a time when the global economy is changing so quickly. What's your approach to that? What's your thinking on that?
Creativity is therapy. And you don't have to be Leonardo da Vinci. You just have to be encouraged to let out what's inside of you. If there's a lot of folks that want to express themselves but don't know how to, they feel like they don't have the currency. If someone encourages you to express yourself and celebrates your execution of that expression, it's enlightening. And the arts in school is a path to that. It allows you to know who you are and how you communicate, how you inspire other people. We live in a society where, especially in America, there's a football field in every single high school. But my sister's not going to play professional football. In every single high school and elementary, there's a basketball court. But my sister's not going to play for the NBA. Yes, there's a female version of that, but they're not making the kind of money that the NBA basketball players make. But in every high school, there's not a computer science program, there's not a robotics program, there's not an autonomy program. And if you think about, creativity, there's not a music program, there's not a financial literacy program for inner city kids to get out of poverty. There's a lot of things that we're behind on when it comes to the basic things that people need to survive emotionally, financially, and support their families, and ignite that light to inspire other people. And empathy is not practiced in schools, and I think the arts, music is a beautiful, we undervalue the power of music. Music is the only realm at which somebody that's in music can be in any sector of the world, and you're like, okay. For example, if you were to see somebody from music at a political event, you're like, okay, who are you going to help get elected? If you see somebody in music at an event after a natural disaster. You're like, oh, wow, thank you so much for bringing awareness to what's going on. You bring somebody to music at a sporting event. You're like, wow, you really made it. You're here at the sporting event. You bring somebody to music at an event like this. You're like, wow, you must be doing some philanthropic work. You see somebody at music at a strip club. You're like, oh, wow, you're living that life. No matter where you go, music is there. And it's accepted that they're there. You say the same thing for a politician. They can't go everywhere.
Right.
A corporation, they can't go everywhere. Music is a very dynamic, very like elastic tentacle in every single corner of the world. And we need to celebrate that, and more importantly, have that in all schools, that music is stripped away from ghettos. Music is stripped away from, the core method to allow you to appreciate other cultures. If you're playing jazz, you want to understand what's happening in India. You want to understand their scale.
Right.
And if you're playing like any type of music, you want to collaborate and improvise across different cultural scales, because it's all influential. It's all inspirational. Music is powerful.
Thank you. And with those very powerful words, I'm afraid I'm going to have to close our session. But thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.
And for your insights. Will.I.am.